Does the Thermacell bug repeller actually work? Well, if you're interested in hearing my thoughts on it, keep watching. All right, so I brought out 3 different products from Thermacell. 1 I purchased myself, and 2 were sent to me by Thermacell themselves, and I want to thank them for doing that. Now, I've had these products in my possession almost 2 years. Well, okay, the one I purchased I've had a lot longer than that. But I had them over 2 complete summers so I can get some really good use of them in bug season. And that's what I wanted to do, is to make sure that I tried to, I don't know, come up with every variable that you might think of to whether or not these are actually effective. So that's what we're going to do today. Is quickly I'm going to go over each of the 3 devices that I brought out. I'm going to talk about their costs relative to the purchase of them and whether or not they're worth it. I'm also going to tell you at the end which is my personal favorite as well. But before we get started, there's a few things we need to talk about. Effectiveness. How do you even measure effectiveness? Well, I know that there is a lot of people that will swear by the Thermacell and say that it is the only thing that will work for them in terms of repelling mosquitoes primarily. I should tell you right now, they do not repel deer flies or horse flies. They're not affected by this in the least, in my experience. But I've also seen some spectacular fails of these devices. My friend Jeep at the YouTube channel Econo Challenge took a couple of these devices into a swamp area, and he was literally covered in mosquitoes. And he laid these literally between his feet, and they should have been at maximum effectiveness, and they failed on him drastically. So he has no faith in them at all. My experience is somewhat different. Having said that, I guess the question you want answered is, Marcus, do they actually work? Well, I'll answer that question for you now. Yes, they do, and no, they don't. What am I talking about? All right, let's get started. Right, in getting ready for this video, I did quite a bit of research into the topic of bug repellents and Thermacells and a number of other products as well that are on the market that promise to repel mosquitoes, and some of them actually will claim to repel deer fly, horse flies away. And one of the things I did is I reached out to Thermacell themselves to have a few of my questions answered. I'll get to what their response was in a minute. One of the first things you need to know is there are factors affecting their effectiveness that are basically outside of Thermacell's control. Number 1 is the time of year. So obviously in the summertime, spring and summertime, the mosquitoes and other like black flies and other biting insects are at their peak. Actually, even probably more so in the spring, late spring, when the females come out and they're the ones that actually bite, not the male flies, of course. So that's a factor that it will influence whether or not they work. And why is that? Is because of the concentration. And this is one of the questions I put to Thermacell, and their response was, if you have a heavy pressure, these are their words, a heavy pressure of biting insects, let's say you are 300 mosquitoes in any given hour are around you. Now, this sounds like a somewhat arbitrary number, and it is, but it will make the point. 300 mosquitoes around you in any given hour, and your repellent is 90% effective. If it's 90% effective, that means 30 of those 300 mosquitoes are still going to get through your defenses and bite you. And it could lead you to think that the thing is not working, when in fact it may be working very well. But I guess the thing you need to know is there is no 100% defense against biting insects with the Thermacell. It has to be a full-on strategy. We'll talk more about that in a few moments' time. So that's factor number 1. The density of the insects, the biting insects around it, will have a real impact on whether or not any of them get through. The next thing, obviously, is environmental conditions. Are you in an area of breeding ground? So I'm in a semi-swampy area right here where I come every once in a while, and I chose this today hoping that there were a lot of biting insects out. They're not. Few deer flies, that's it. It's too late in the summer for a lot of biting insects. That doesn't mean I don't have experience with this, which I'll share with you, but none today that I could demonstrate it with. So if you're in a breeding area with a lot of stagnant sitting water, then of course you're going to have a greater concentration of biting insects. So that's obvious. If you're out on the edge of a lake with a good strong breeze coming, you're going to have fewer insects biting. Makes sense, doesn't it? But the things to take into consideration when you claim whether your Thermacell worked for you or failed on you. The other thing is Thermacell actually uses what they call a zone of protection, or that's the way they express it, a zone of protection. Each of the devices and the replaceable repellents are, how should I say, not guaranteed, but they have a rated area of coverage. That's a better way of explaining it, a rated area of coverage. You need to know that that area coverage is different for each of the devices that I'm going to show you. And that's only effective, that area of coverage will only exist if you're sitting still. Okay, so if you start walking with one of these devices, you're not going to be able to establish the area of coverage because the gases that are released by the repellent create a concentration in a given area, and that's what works to repel the insects. Not only repel, actually kills insects, and because of the type of repellent it is, which I'll talk about in a moment as well. So you need to know that you got to be sitting still, you got to be out of the wind, and you got to give it time to build up that area of concentration that will be effective. Not everybody does that. They walk and, well, okay, if you're walking, then you're likely not getting the same number of biting insects, except for deer flies. They chase me, I swear. They actually set ambush and wait for me to come into the woods. That's another story, right? So those are a few of the things. But here's one I wasn't anticipating, and only because of other knowledge I had on the topic, that I reached out to Thermacell and I said, what about this? Does this influence the effectiveness? And they agreed, it does. And that is the species of insects. Now, specifically, I'm going to talk about mosquitoes. And I do have a little bit of statistics here, which is worth knowing. Did you know that there are 3,500 different species of mosquitoes worldwide? Who knew? I didn't until I started looking into it. I was aware that there are more than one species of mosquitoes, but in Nova Scotia itself, and of course that's where I'm at, Nova Scotia, there are 27 different species of mosquitoes here. They come out at different times of the year, and they have different appetites, we'll say, and they are all affected differently by the repellents. And that is right from Thermacell. They wanted us to know that different species of mosquitoes are affected differently, some more and some less. So that's another factor which will play into whether it's effective for you. Okay, I wanted to put those factors out there to take into consideration when if you choose to use a Thermacell and you discover it's not working quite as you thought it might, there might be another reason for it. All right, what I want to do very quickly is go through each of the three devices I have with me. And I have one other thing I brought with me that I know a lot of you are familiar with, and I'll talk about how effective it is in comparison with the Thermacells. All right, let's get started. All right, the first unit I want to show you is probably the one that's most familiar, most synonymous with the look of what a Thermacell is supposed to look like. This is the MR3000, one of the classics. I purchased this probably 7 or 8 years ago. I use it out here occasionally. I've come up with other strategies that I think are even more effective than this, or at least they work better in combination with a device like this. Where this gets used most often is when Jean and I go car camping in Kujpaquak National Park, and yes, mosquitoes are a real concern for us there at the time of year that we go. So this is the unit I have the most experience with, but it does apply to the other two units I'm going to share with you, but I want to go over just a few things for that. Now, one of the things I wanted to look at is unit cost, because this is what you want to know as well, is it worth the money to invest in a Thermacell? Well, there's a few things you need to know. One, what's the upfront cost of the device? Then you need to know how it operates. All of them use some type of a repellent. It's a replaceable repellent. Well, in the case of this one is the pad. You can see it's half blue, half white inside. They will sip it. If it's blue, it's fresh. If it's starting to turn white, it's starting to age. And when it turns completely white, there's no more repellent left on it. And then you replace the repellent. But the other thing is they each have a butane cartridge inside of them. So the butane cartridge and the repellents themselves, the pads, will only last so long, and then you have to replace them. So depending on how often you use it and how quickly you run through these things can really impact the ongoing cost of this device. So let me just give you a few specifics on that. Now, You don't have to try to memorize this. I'm going to put it all in the video description. If you are wanting to know which is the most cost-effective of the three that I'm going to show you, then you can work it out there. And I'll save my personal favorite to the end. All right, so unit cost for this. Right now, I don't know what I paid for it 7 or 8 years ago, but right now they're selling here in Canada for $50. That doesn't seem outrageous if it works, right? The refill cost. So each of the individual pads, the ones you see inside there, are $1.92. Now, you buy them en masse, they're cheaper, but they average $1.92. And they're rated to last 4 hours. That means this will run at about 48 cents per hour for each one of those pads. That doesn't sound too bad, but now you have to add in the fuel costs, the butane. Each of the butane cylinders, I think I have one here. Well, actually, I'll just take the one out so that if you're not familiar, you'll know what these look like. These are the butane cylinders that go inside this one. Now, this is the only one that I have that uses it. The others use different types of fuel. By the way, I've seen lots of videos of people refilling these, taking the check valve out, and then putting butane back inside of it. If that's your thing, I just hate for it to leak on me while I was using it. But if that's your thing and you can do it and have comfort in that you were effective in making it safe, then you're going to save some money on the operation of these things. But each one of those fuel cells right now cost here $5.75 Canadian, of course. They last for 12 hours for each cylinder. And that means a runtime, it will cost you 48 cents per hour. Okay, that doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're out on your campsite for 4 or 5 hours in the evening when the bugs are at their thickest, then you're going to run through one of those pads and you're going to run through well, a quarter of the gas. So 4 pads, it's going to take 4, I guess what I'd say is the butane cylinder is going to last for 4 of these pads. Let's do some math. 3 of those pads, right? So it's not going to last that long. That means you end up taking additional butane cylinders. So I guess what I'm trying to say is it can add up the running of these devices. Now, if they're effective and they work for you and you're using them and you're happy with them, then that's great. That's all that really matters. If you're wondering if it's worth the money, I have a few alternatives that you might find more attractive. Now, one of the things that I found interesting is the actual repellent. What is it? Elethrin. Does that sound familiar? Sound a lot like permethrin? Well, chemically, they're similar. They're not the same, but chemically, they are similar. They have very similar characteristics. They just don't repel, they kill. So if something gets within the range, that dome of effectiveness, then the insects will die. Maybe not right away, but they will die. So that's one of the things that you may say, well, there's not a lot of flies here and they're still biting me. It can't be working. Well, it might be killing a lot of them before they even get to you, and just a few diehards are getting through the defenses. So that's just another way of looking at that. So this uses elethrin, 35%, each of the pads. Now, here's something that I've considered as well. And I haven't tried this, and I may, but I need to do some more research. When those pads that you see inside there, let me show you one in a package. So here's what a package is of pads come. They're all sealed in a little mylar, and you take one out and you use it, and you push through the old one out and push the new one in. My thinking is I'm wondering if I could soak them in permethrin and recharge the pads themselves. Something tells me that's probably not a good idea, but I'm going to do a little bit more research and see if it's actually effective and safe, of course, is also an important thing. All right, operation of these, I'll leave that for you to discover. They're very simple. You turn the gas flow on, you press the button, it'll spark, you'll actually hear it. There's a little viewing window in the end. You'll see it starts to glow and it starts to heat up, and the heat causes the fuel, the repellent on the pad to be released. And sometimes you can actually see it fuming as it comes up. So that's number 1. I've had it the longest. Has it been effective? Yes and no again. All right, let me bring out number 2. All right, number 2, this is the Thermacell EX90 Rechargeable. So there's a rechargeable lithium-ion battery inside of this, and this was sent to me by Thermacell. This one works a little bit different. Now, its primary intended use is more around home or around a stationary camp. So yeah, you could take a car camping, but it's more of a home item as well. And the reason being is because, well, the fuel is electricity. The rechargeable battery is only going to last so long, and you're going to have some means of recharging the battery in order to keep it going. Operation is very simple. It's just an on-off button right here, and that's all there is to it. I just want to show you this because, well, The recharge, you can see, micro USB, not USB Type-C. Now, the reason I show you that is micro USB is still fine, it still works. It's slow. That's the only thing. So when this battery runs down and you want to charge it back up, it's going to take time. So probably the rule is if you get through the evening and you're fine, and the idea is charge it up again before the next night, because otherwise you're going to might just run out in the middle of the night. So you want to keep it charged. Don't let it go to a dead status before it operates. Now, as fuel in this is different as well. So buttons on the side that will release the top, and the fuel is liquid. Now this cylinder is just about empty, and that's a wick sticking out of the top. So what happens is the heating element is actually up inside there. Can you see the white in the center there? That's the heating element, and it heats the wick up, and that draws the liquid repellent up through the cartridge and sends it out. Again, you will see these things fuming or sending out fumes once they get hot. Now, all right. Now, that's how the device works. Let's just talk about the unit cost for this and a few of the dollars and cents to help make some decision. All right, price cost for this right now in Canada, $59, a little bit more expensive than the MR3000. Refill costs, all right, those cartridges, I do have another one here. Where's my other liquid cartridge? They come in, where are they? Yeah, there is two sizes. I forget which size, the one that's in it and one that's isn't. But they come in two sizes, depending on how long they're going to run. The one that's in it, it costs $26 to purchase, just one cartridge. Yes, $26, but is rated to work for 36 hours. So that comes out to 72 cents per hour to run that little liquid cartridge. There's no fuel cost to put in this because it's electricity, right? How do you factor that? If you're using house current, or you're using your power station to recharge it, whatever. But a full charge will last 5.5 hours. So that's just over one good evening of use. So that's why I said you want to recharge this on a daily basis. The repellent that's in those little cartridges is metofluthrin. Okay, best guess, 5.5% metofluthrin. Again, a derivative of the same, or the same similar compounds, we'll say, to permethrin. So it has, again, the same effect. It not just repels, but it actually kills insects. So it's really convenient to use. You just press the button and turn it on. The lights will come on. They'll go around in a little circle. There's 4 lights around the button. It'll tell you it's running. When it runs down, it tells you. It'll actually tell you that the battery's about to die, so you're not left guessing if you ran out of battery status. Effectiveness, again, actually, personally, I find this a little bit more effective than my older MR3000. I'm not sure why, if it has something to do with the dome of protection you get, the area concentration, but for me, it just seemed to be a little bit more effective. Now, I will talk about my testing and how I compared one against the other in a moment's time. All right, so that is unit number 2. Let me grab unit number 3. All right, the last device that I want to show you is the backpacker from Thermacell. And Thermacell did send this out to me so that I could share it with you. And I'll tell you now, this is my personal favorite of the 3. Mostly because, well, one is its physical size. This is the only one, by the way, that came with a little stuff sack. The others did not. So physical size is one for carrying it around. And number 2 is fuel cost. This one is going to be the cheapest for you to run on an ongoing basis, and I'll get to the reasons why. Operation of this is very simple. You attach this to any gas canister, butane, isobutane, whatever mix it you want, 4 ounce, 8 ounce, 16 ounce gas canister, anything with a Lindell valve you can attach this to. There's the, oh, it's actually under the cover right there. So you can see the attachment for a Lindell valve. Just screws onto the top, turn the gas flow on here, and then press down on this switch. It sparks inside. You'll hear it ignite, and there's a little viewing window right inside that hole up here, and you'll see it start to glow, and then it starts to heat up. It uses the same repellent pads as the MR3000 does, so that cost remains the same. We'll talk about this in a moment. So, but the fuel cost is much, much cheaper. So let's just go through the numbers on this one. So purchase price right up front for one of these units is $50 Canadian, so right on the same mark as the MR3000. Fuel, or not fuel cost, repellent cost is exactly the same, uses the same pads, $1.92 per pad. They last 4 hours each, meaning that they will run you 48 cents an hour to use them. but it's fuel costs where things really start to get cheap. So I'm pricing this off of an 8-ounce or 227 gram cylinder of isobutane I purchased at one of our local hardware stores, and I paid $9 Canadian for it. Yes, I know you can do much cheaper. Here's the best part about it. That would last if I did nothing else with it. Now remember, I'm probably using that for cooking meals or boiling water or something like that anyway, but that would last if I did nothing else but other than run this thing off of it for 180 hours. So that is 5 cents an hour. That's all it costs to run this, is 5 cents an hour when it comes to fuel costs. So I think that's probably by far the most economical for this. So once again, why do I like this? Small size, economical to run, and those are the things going for it. Now, effectiveness, again, really hard to say. I will say at least as effective as the MR3000. That's my impression. Well, basically it should be the same because you're using the same repellent pads. Effectiveness compared with the EX90, the rechargeable one, well, I did say it is a little better, the EX90, but again, that's somewhat subjective. It's hard to actually put physical numbers, like how many mosquitoes did I not get bitten by? You understand the difficulty in doing that. So it's a little bit hard to say, but I will say I really like using this because of its small size and its cost effectiveness. I didn't mind the fuel cost at all because it was so thrifty that way. Okay. This may be my favorite one, but all three will have very, very similar results. So what has been my experience? Well, as I mentioned, I have had these for 2 full bug seasons, we'll say, spring and summer, and tested them quite extensively at mostly Kouchipakwak National Park, but also out here in the woods. Gina and I both sitting together in the evening, reading by headlamp and putting this down on the ground beside us and seeing how effective it was. I would run it for maybe an hour. I would turn one off. I would let it time for the gases to move on, and then I would start another one up, and we'd see how they work. All of them worked to a degree. All of them failed to a degree. So none of these are 100% effective, so you need to know that. Now, you can increase your effectiveness, I've discovered, if you run more than one of these devices at the same time. So you have both devices going, and you create a much denser concentration of the repellent in the area. You're going to get a better effect. But of course, it's much more expensive to do it that way. So they will all work, and when they don't, there's usually a reason for it, such as none of them they don't even claim, Thermacell doesn't even claim them to be 100% effective. So you need to know that. They are not 100%. But do they work? My experience is yes, to a degree, given all the factors we talked about in a minute. Now, I did mention opening that there was one more product I wanted to share with you. This has been around for a long, long time, and we'll talk about how well it compares against the Thermacell. Mosquito coils. Old-time, old-school mosquito coils. Now, this brand is Mosquito Shield, and we were buying these, and it's not that they're necessarily better than the Coglins or any of the others. It's more because these had longer run times, so they were just a slight bit bigger. They all basically use exactly the same ingredients, and they all basically have exactly the same effectiveness as far as that goes. So let's just talk about these for a minute, because I did put a few numbers to this as well, so you can get an idea of cost effectiveness. So where's my mosquito shields? Okay, now here's the thing. When I gave you the cost of each of the 3 Thermacell units, there was a price to the purchase of the device itself. There's no purchase price for any device here. What you're paying for is the repellent and the repellent alone. You're not paying for a device to run the repellent out of. So the refill cost, each one of those coils runs about 70 cents Canadian. That's not bad when you think about it, right? Each one of those coils lasts for 7 hours. That means it's going to cost 10 cents an hour to run total. That's your total cost for running those coils. What you need to know is the ingredient in them is the same as it is in the pads that Thermacell uses. Lethren, 35%, exactly the same concentration, same ingredient as well. So do they work? Yeah, they do. They actually work probably just as effective as any of the Thermacells do. And if you wanted to put 2 coils, one on your picnic table, one on the ground somewhere else, so that the gases or the repellent is all around you, you're probably going to feel better about doing that than you would running the others, because it's going to be so much cheaper to use the mosquito coils. Now, not all is perfect. There's a couple of downsides to running these things. One is that I shouldn't say it takes a bit of work to light, but you do have to light them, right? You have to have a lighter of some type. It takes a little bit of time, maybe 10 seconds or so, for the flame to really, or the coil to really catch on from the flame. And it's just a glowing ember that goes around and around. And you've all seen them in operation, right? Some people don't like the smoke of them, and yeah, I can understand that if you catch it right in the face, it's a bit annoying to have the smoke from these coils. But I'll tell you, smoke is another thing that's very effective. And Thermacell did tell me this, that mosquitoes don't fly in the smoke. So if you have a combination of a fire going and one of these devices, you've got the best of both worlds. The smoke alone will do most of the work, and the Thermacell will just enhance that. So these work. They do have a little bit of a smell that some people will find objectionable. If they get damp from the humidity, they don't fall apart, but they do kind of stretch out of shape. So you just let them dry out and you use them again. Probably the one thing to think about with these is when you're using them, because it is a glowing coal. You can start a fire with these if you wanted to. You could create a tinder bundle, break off one of these glowing coals and start a fire with it. You could also start a fire unintentionally. So that's something to think about, is make sure that wherever you're using one of these mosquito coils, it's on a burn safe surface so it doesn't accidentally or unintentionally fall onto something combustible. All right, I think that's fair enough, and common sense, but bears reminding, okay? All right, let's wrap this video up. All right, everything that I've said to you in this video has been mostly my personal impressions and through 2 seasons of use. Yes, the MR30 I've had for a lot longer, but I intentionally did side-by-side comparisons between all 3 of these devices over 2 full bug seasons, springs and summer, in a variety of circumstances. And I've come to the conclusion, and this is Gina's experience also. By the way, Gina is much more prone to being bitten than I am by mosquitoes, and I'm much more prone to being bitten by deer flies or horseflies. Biology, DNA, I'm not sure what it is. But Gina will say the same thing. These work to a degree in the right circumstances. So if you look at it that way, as part of a strategy for keeping yourself as bug-free as possible, then these are worthwhile considering. But you do have to take into consideration the cost of running each of these devices. Do they work? Yes, but not at 100% effective. Now, a couple of things I want to say here. First off, when I started doing the research on this, it occurred to me that maybe I could also put a video together, a more comprehensive bug protection strategy video, if you will. Maybe part of my coffee or hiking a coffee series. Let me know if that would be of interest to you, and I'll start working on that, and we'll bring that to you at a later time. But I'd also like to hear from you about your experiences using Thermacell. Did they work as expected for you? Did they fail miserably? I'm interested in knowing. And I'll tell you, this is the other thing Thermacell did tell me. They continue to test these devices worldwide on a variety of species, because it's not just a matter of annoyance being bitten by mosquitoes. In some areas, it can be a matter of life and death, because there are some serious diseases that are carried by mosquitoes in a lot of countries, and with the climate change that we're all experiencing, some of those diseases are going to be carried into our areas. So it can be very important to make sure you are protected from biting insects for those reasons. Oh, by the way, ticks, that's something else I should mention. Yes, they also work for ticks to a degree, but I learned also that ticks have such a slow respiration that you could literally dump the Thermacell on them and they wouldn't die right away. They will die. It just takes a little while, because it takes a while for them to absorb it into their system. Then it will kill them. So that's just also. But most of us, it's mosquitoes primarily, and black flies that, depending where in the world. I know there are midges and there are gnats, and there's I think there's other names for bugs from around the world. They work for all of the biting insects except for deer flies and horse flies, right? Okay, if you have any comments or questions, put them in the comments section below. All the information I shared with you will be in the video description, as well as links to where you can purchase any of these devices. But until next time, get out and explore and take that path less traveled, because it will make all the difference. Bye for now.